thing, if you're seeing this on Facebook, and sign up for the podcast. Just
Supernatural Living Messages.
All you gotta do is put in Todd Bentley.
Yeah.
There's only one.
Yes,
you'll
true.
get it, and you'll see it.
I hope there's only one.
Yeah, there's only one that looks like him. You don't have to worry about that. So,
With the
hey,
beard. Yeah.
this is part 2 of a series we're doing about revival. And if you haven't seen part 1, go back and view
It's
the
on
week
all our
before
platforms too.
Yeah, go back to the
Website,
week
app, all the
before.
platforms.
But we covered stuff like the kind of revivals he's seen, things that has triggered that he knew something special was happening.
How do you know it's revival?
Right,
How do you
versus
know
just a
when to
really good
extend?
meeting, you know, and some of those things. And we talked about the difference between a powerful meeting and a revival meeting. So now we're going to go into some other questions. So let's open up with prayer, and then I'm going to ask them some questions, and we're going to throw them out there and let them answer them.
And we're going to pray for impartation.
Oh, absolutely.
And we're going to be sure if you're watching, because hunger and there's a stirring happening in your heart. God's using, I hope he's using the content. And, you know, and recapping in the first, we really talked about, I was thinking in 22 years of preaching in 73 nations I've been, you know, and we've seen millions, you know, reached with the gospel, saved, and from the revival in Pakistan, where we had 3 resurrections of the dead. I talk about that because it was the most public, on record, 3 people raised from the dead.
It's on YouTube. You can watch
Hundreds
it.
of thousands saved that were Muslims in that revival in Pakistan in 2 of our major trips to Pakistan. That was different than, say, all the hundreds of crusades I've done in Africa and Europe and South America and the jungles of Bolivia, Peru, you know, by the grace of God. But I could say I've only seen maybe 8 or 9 revivals in 22 years. Not everything is revival. And I think the term needs to be redefined in its simplest form. Revival is a work of the Holy Spirit reviving us. We're always being from glory to glory, from experience to, you know, let's be revived. And we all need a little waking up.
And I want to encourage you as ministers. Look, we pray a lot, okay? But that doesn't mean that if I hear, like if Todd tells me a meeting's exploded and something special is happening, I don't go, that's awesome. I get in the car and go because I'm hungry. Because, you know, it doesn't always happen in my prayer room first.
You see, and it's funny you said, I think we spend so much time praying for revival sometimes, and we connect it to praying for revival in my church, in my ministry. We got to get over, for me, the best revival is when I don't have church and ministry.
That's right.
Because I feel like if everything's about church, ministry, conference, seminar, traveling, itinerating, booking the next weekend, who's got the move of God, I got to get into that church.
Works.
Then it becomes works, and then we call it revival. How do we know in advance? I've never just promoted or advertised something as revival first. I realized, and here's a key again for people that are looking for me to drop the nuggets. I gave one in the first revival part 1, and here's you know, about hearing the Lord day by day, daily bread, daily manna. Here's another nugget. When I am in extended meetings, I never extend more than 1 week at a time, even though I know I might be there indefinitely. Like Lakeland, Florida, how did you know to stay, whether 3 days, 2 weeks, or a month, or how did you know
You didn't
to
make
stay?
that decision. You
I
didn't
didn't make the decision at first. I would wait at least, and this is just wisdom
Thursday or
talking.
Friday or
I would wait, if I had a move of God after a weekend, I would announce, hey, I'm going to do a special, you know, series of meetings next week on the Tuesday, Wednesday, and I would see who showed up. Then I might go, we're going to go for it Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then Sunday, I might go, you know what? Who thinks we should go another week? And I look for the overall witness of the people, not just me.
Right.
And if there's enough hunger in the room and everyone's like, yeah, let's go another week, then I announce, we're going another week. And I extend week by week. I don't just go indefinite. We got revival, we're in the move of God. Because then what happens if in 3 weeks you're supposed to transition out and the whole world goes, what happened to the revival you hyped up? And then all of a sudden 2 weeks later you're gone. That's why I would never advance more than a week
we're gonna talk
until I knew what I had going first. I got to see what the baby is before I put a name on it too quickly.
About, like, some of the dangers of that as a local pastor. And I do have a church. And some of the dangers of the temptation to try to just extend it, especially with your own people.
Tell the people as a church the danger in you hosting revivalists, because some of you are leaders and pastors. You want to host guys like me, because you want to see revival in your city. So tell me the bad experiences, without names, of course. Tell me some.
Well, let me tell you the good, because I do always love giving honor. And the people that deposited in us, Bill Johnson, he didn't come here, but he certainly deposited my life. But the ones who came here was Todd, Jeff Jansen, Wine Riot. And they all deposited in us. Now, the temptation was people were calling here.
Now, Jeff Jansen's a great revivalist general that's gone to be with the Lord now.
Yeah.
And but what a legacy of revival for those that remember the early days with Jeff. When he came here, it was, and I remember, because
it was after 2008 for you.
Yeah, it was after Lakeland.
It was 2010.
People were spreading the fire because Ryan Wyatt was in Lakeland. Ryan Wyatt was one of our interns at one time, and one of my old associates out of Pensacola.
I had them all in here, and now here's the problem. I started getting phone calls. Man, I heard from Jeff. I heard from Ryan. Things are happening at the Gate Church. I'm going to be in Florida. And I go, hey, that's awesome. Let's have some coffee. No, I'm going to be available. And the temptation is all these people not want to come to your church.
You see, and I've seen this when I've talked to leaders and pastors. They go, hey, Todd, say you've had, people would either have me or say an associate, a ministry associate. And then once they heard there was success with one guy, when there's prophetic itinerant traveling type ministry, it's amazing because all of a sudden the phone's ringing, you get 100 guys. Hey, Lewis, have me in. Hey, Lewis, have me in. People experience that. You'll notice after you have a high-level guy or a breaker or a pioneer, in the wake of that, and this can be good, all of a sudden your email and your inbox, not just pastors from India and Pakistan, come preach for me, but everybody wants to, but opportunists can come. We got to watch. Because
the bad part of this is that you feel pressure. You feel like
as a pastor,
as a leader,
host, you're hosting like, revival.
And then you get people in the church. Oh, I know so and so. You should have them in. And by the way, this is some of the pressure, especially when you have.
But how about your people? If you were hosting me. And it was your people working in the revival. We have to be sensitive to things like time, people go to work, schedules. So does the revival have to go 7 days a week, or can we do 5 days a week and take a couple days to rest? I didn't know how to rest. I went 7 days a week.
One minister wanted me to do continuous meetings every weekend, like every Friday, Saturday night. And I said, well, that's awesome because you come in.
As a guest from out of state, fly in,
you do the meetings, you leave Sunday, but my people have no rest because they go to work Monday through Friday. That means they got to be here Friday, Saturday night.
And you're a smaller church,
Smaller church, we're 50, 60 people. We grew up to 100 and something, but the problem is that I was sensitive that I didn't want to burn out the people. Here's one of the things I can tell you. If you don't have fresh people coming in, because if it's a real revival, you have people come in and they begin to work it for you. And your people aren't carrying the whole burden of it. You don't want your local church to be carrying the financial burden of it. You don't want your local church carrying the work part of it because they have families.
Here's what I've done. If I could interject at this point as an evangelist partnering with pastors when revival does, like in Lakeland, Florida with Stephen Strader, just referring back to that time when Lakeland, Florida, the Florida outpouring in 2008, and it being the most public, revival that I've had in America. Let's talk about that. When I went to work with Stephen Strader in his small church of maybe a couple hundred people, Ignited Church. We were in his church building. I rented his building, and I actually paid a fee every night. And I offered to pay his toilet paper, his air conditioning, the janitor. People don't think about that, to keep the lights on. So I had a business, whatever the money was. Hey, Stephen, thank you for letting us rent your church. I brought in Roy Fields. He didn't attend Stephen Strader. I paid the fly.
So that is not everybody.
So now, but I'm saying, here's how, because I got to remember, a lot of my guys are upcoming revivalists. They want to know, hey, Todd, teach us how to work with pastors. So what I would do is, and I did this in Ohio and I did this in Texas, every revival I've had is self-sufficient in the sense of I bring in all of my interns and associates and all of the people I've met in all the years of ministry that I have friendships with, so that I don't carry the burden myself and burn out the local church. I'll bring in 10 or 20 of my own staff, my own interstaff, people that pay their own way. So I help take the burden off the church.
Some of that, you're not, Todd's big. He was
well, no, I'm not big now at all.
No, but I mean, you were
This
there.
was in Lakeland.
But
when it started, it was 200 people. It wasn't big.
It wasn't big.
But I had to learn on the go as Lakeland blew up. So, we rented an office, and overnight, because I was in Canada, a lot of people don't know, in Lakeland, I was a Canadian ministry. All my people coming to the Lakeland revival were on visas. They're not allowed to work. I had to bring people that I didn't know in America, because at that time in 2008, I wasn't a big name So what we learned as the revival grew, because that's what this podcast is about, working with revival, is I took the revival, once it outgrew the restrictions of working in a local church, we went to a neutral venue, which I find a lot of times to maintain revival in a city, it can't be connected to any one church or ministry. It must transcend. So going to a neutral convention center or ballroom or something.
If you're a minister and you just feel like you and the pastor sit down, you go, hey, I really feel like there's something special.
Oh, me and Stephen Strader communicated every day.
By the way, I called Stephen when this person wanted to do extended meetings to get some of his wisdom. Okay. And I asked him about some of the things, this is not a Stephen podcast, so I'm not going to tell you those things.
No, but I honor him because he hosted a revival, and he never tried to control, shut down, get religious, get in my way. And I found a way to, like in that revival in Lakeland.
That was the first one that you really had where...
But we shared the finances because God TV had money. Roy Fields had money. Todd Bentley had money. The church had money. And these are things you have to talk about on a podcast because there's a money side to revival. Somebody's got to pay the bills, the air condition, and when churches extend, there's extra burden on the smaller churches when you're going an extra week or two. So a lot of people fall into they blow up the church and leave it shipwrecked financially, and they don't pay all the bills because they're afraid to get down with the pastors like I do with the event. And I have the conversations. I have the relationship.
So let me tell you something.
Relationship.
Let me tell you some of the
you didn't have. Sorry, but you were getting to that in the beginning where you said all these guys call you for the opportunities because they hear that you host revival guys, but they only want you for the opportunity. They don't want genuine kingdom relationship, and this is killing revival in America. Is that it? The motivation isn't love and relationship. It's give me a meeting.
You've got to have the conversation. And one of the conversations I did have
I'm passionate about this because you
should be passionate because it does it turns off a lot of pastors.
And they don't want to host guys like me. A lot of church pastors are like, we love revival, but we don't want to bring in those type ministries because they just come in and take all our money, all our partners, and they don't have any concern. Like I'm hosting a school of revival. The pastor called me up. We haven't talked once about contract money or logistics. He calls me up for a mentoring call and he goes, hey, you're here doing a school of revival. What are the logistics? And I said, I didn't even talk to you about it because we have such a great relationship. He's never been left, nor our ministry left without everything being done. We didn't even talk about the finances. And I went, what do you want me to do? He says, how about just take an offering at the end and give it to us? Because every time we've worked with you. And I like that testimony that I don't leave people. If I go higher, everyone should be going higher with me. And when I was in Lakeland, Stephen Strader, I let him host morning meetings and have 500 to 700 pastors at his church 7 days a week while I was doing meetings across the city in my own tent. And people were like, hey, Todd, you got the tent. Stephen Strader's doing meetings and taking offerings in the morning at his church. And I told Stephen Strader he could host pastors from around the world and have all the money. And I didn't care it was $1 million. I didn't care what it was. And then Roy Fields, and then God TV and the money they were coming. And then what our ministry was bringing in. But when it's revival, everyone should get blessed. There has to be a way to work together.
Well, this is the thing.
That's practical stuff.
A lot of young ministers don't have that model. They don't. They're like, hey, I finally have meetings that I'm going to be blessed in,
and I'm going to get my partners. I got to take my money. You have to work out something, especially if it goes on longer.
If the main goal of that guest minister is to build his partnership, number one, I'm going to tell you some ministers. I'm going to tell you some things. If the people coming there don't know who's coming there, the pastors, and they don't have any clue of how to reach these people, then that doesn't help the local church there. Because next time they have that guy in, they can't email him, they can't do it. So you got to share some names.
Relationships.
Just have to do it. You have to share because I don't mind. Like Todd, a lot of times will take up his own offering. So he has the emails, contact everybody, but he'll share that with me.
But we have that. Not every person I do ministry with am I involved in a partnership with. But when you're running together, the
first time you came,
I was a guest. First time you brought me as a guest.
But we formed it. We worked on relation. You're very relational. So you were easy.
I love people.
I know. That's the one thing I love.
It's hurt me because I trust so quick, and
Right.
I give all of me the good, and here I
So
am.
look, you're
and,
gonna. Here's the thing: it's like
God uses authenticness. He'll use that.
I seek counsel. So if you have a question, find us, and maybe we can help you. Okay, number one, because you don't always
Don't
have-
email me about revival, but if you find Lewis on the internet and on Facebook,
I'll
and
give
you
you-
want to send him all your questions
You
that these
send it to
podcasts
me.
are create, go ahead.
Look, if you can't find Todd, just send it to me, and I'll give you his email. I'll give you his phone number, and
We'll
you can
give
text
you
him.
Richard's email. Yeah.
All right, so
Okay.
but then you're going to have some of these obstacles, and
Yeah.
if it's revival, then the finances are going to be there because people are going to want to give. You have to have that. You have to have, as this local pastor, it's not wrong to sit there and say, hey, look, we're going to need a little cover because our electric bill is normally $400, but now since we're running 7 days a
Yeah.
week, it's going to be $2,000.
These are things that can sideline and create offense. And I've seen revivals end that God wanted to keep going because, one, we didn't sleep, eat, and take care of ourselves.
Right.
We burned out.
Right.
We burned out the people. And two, just some of the practical things like you don't talk, openly and honestly with the group of leaders that you're working with. So, so now there's a chance for division and offense because there's no communication.
Right.
Between,
Make sure
this is important between pastors and evangelists.
make sure that
really.
you do have time together as leadership with the man or woman of God who you have in there speaking. So the next question is, okay, because we've seen this. You were at Lakeland. Things are blowing up. People are calling you, I'm sure. Todd! And they want to be a part, and they want to speak. They've got something from the Lord.
Yeah, whenever I host revival, all of your minister friends or wannabes, I call them
Well,
wannabes.
let's just call them friends.
Some are wannabes.
Right,
Not all of them
right.
are friends. Some of them are friends. Some you've shared platforms with in different conferences over the years. Some become friends just because they want to get alongside of the name and the clout. I'm not naming any particular people,
I know,
but
it happens.
I'm talking the wide paintbrush of American pastors and leaders, and this is a problem everywhere.
Yes, it's
You know?
So what was the rule before you?
I have a rule. Whenever people wanted to preach in, hey Todd, can I help contribute what you got going on? Like Lakeland, for example. If anybody, I didn't care who you were, I had everybody, even John Kilpatrick, Precious, thank God for the legacy and the evangelist Steve Hill. I had the chance to meet the man and pray for him. He was in his battle, of course, near the end, Steve Hill, the event with, Pensacola, Florida fame. Him and Kilpatrick came to Lakeland. I was honored to have them, to have Bill Johnson, to have John and Carol Arnott, to have fathers, Randy Clark, people, Heidi Baker. I could go on and on with people that have been fathers of revival and honored for what they've carried and done in the work of revival. I didn't know what I was doing when I showed up at 29, 30 years old to Lakeland, Florida.
That was
Todd
certainly-
Bentley from Canada, bearded, tattooed, let's just say out of the box, didn't fit the pigeonhole. And here I am, I'm Canadian, and I'm in Lakeland, Florida, and a worldwide revival. Now they want to put me on God TV. Now listen, I didn't do any of this stuff, but see, God TV was like, we want to showcase what God is doing in real time live. And I've loved God TV. Back in the day, this was the way God TV modeled themselves when I worked with God TV. They were all about the live. If God's moving in Kansas City with Mike Bickle, we're there. If God's moving in Redding, California, we're there. If God's moving at Morning Star with Rick Joyner, we're there. If God's moving with Todd Bentley, we're there. If God's moving with Roy Fields, we're there. Whoever it was, God TV was the place that was so in love with revival breaking out. They wanted to bring everything and bring that element live, not so produced and so I loved working with, it was Wendy and Rory Alec back then. And so when they heard about revival, they wanted to be there. And for the first time, they were like, we want to take real revival as it's growing and put it out there raw to the whole world. Now, quickly, we went from 250 people to 7,000 to 10,000, and it went on like this for 5 months. 405,000 people come in. I had to put up the 10,000 seat tent. Well, anyways, in the midst of all of that, the challenge for me was overnight. I went from like being busy to I would have up to 50 people a day, magazines, TV, reporters, BBC News, Nightline News, Geraldo, Oprah Winfrey, Fox, and then all the European, around the world, Germany. and all the reporters, I hired a woman, and every day, 5 days a week, I had 2 hours of meeting with the press and doing media conferences, media sit downs every day. And she would have to go, Todd can only do 8 interviews today. You got from 5 o'clock to 5:15, from 5:15 to 5:30, from 5:30. And we would schedule them every day.
Would you
then
do
I
those
had
again?
no time to sleep, eat, be with my
Let me ask
family,
you something.
or go to the gym.
Would you do it that way again?
This is what I'm saying. The busyness of revival, I got so burned out because I wasn't able to maintain any kind of take 2-3 days a week just to be with the Lord and rest. Somehow in the busyness and the hype of it all, I'm preaching 127 straight days. I'm doing services that start at 6 o'clock that go to 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Right. Sometimes at 3 in the morning, I'm laying hands on 10,000 people. I did that for 10 nights in a row. Right. So stuff I would never do again. Just to give people the idea, though, the revival, I would tell people, if you're going to be a part of it, it's so wholly indifferent. No, you can't just be on the card like a conference speaker. Right. You have to sit in it for 1 week.
I told everyone,
1 week.
You're going to get touched by it.
Come and be in it. I want to know that you want it for the move of God, not the opportunity to preach because there's a platform.
Right.
And we got to watch. Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to grow and Elijah. And, I'm all about impartation and training and raising up and putting out there. But we also have to understand in our motivation, so much of what we've built and done in American ministry, and whether I knew I was enabling it or not, we lend to the idea that somehow we get this performance-based identity where the idea of how we think we've made it as an itinerant, full-time revival traveling minister, we would base it on all the wrong reasons, I think. And I think there's a reset in the church right now. I'm excited about it.
And so let's go moving forward. Okay, this happens again. How's it important for you this time to give all that stuff to someone else so you can stay focused?
Well, I think what's great is we talk about next time. Obviously, the goal is to live in the kingdom, and to not be in constant need be in constant need of revival. I think the idea is God puts the fire, and you have to get the fire from God. God is the only one, and God puts the fire on the altar. And I heard Rick Joyner say it this time. Listen, you can't make the fire happen. It's God's fire. God puts the fire on the altar. Okay, so our job is, how do we keep the fire burning in us, not corporately? Because if it's not burning in me, it will burn out corporately. So, if you're not thinking about how can I, the priest of my own lampstand, I want to be a burning, shining lamp. My whole focus, people go, Todd, how do you prepare for revival meetings? I don't pray for revival. I don't fast for revival. I don't get together and pray on Tuesday nights and have leaders come to repent to pray for revival. And for me, I don't think revival, a lot of people are like, revival is harvest, revival is repentance. We have all these ideas of what revival is. No, we're not talking about reformation, transformation, awakening. We got all these different words, living in the kingdom as a lifestyle. Don't get caught up on terms, okay? I'm a finished works guy.
Might have a manifestation.
Yeah,
but all revival.
But here's the key, and if I could stress this, revival is about me and Jesus.
That's right.
It always comes back to, because I don't have the control over everyone in my city. I could be in the most religious city. If I was basing revival on how all the leaders don't come together in unity, help us in America. Because, if I was a doom and gloom or a judgment or a preacher, depending on what side of the coin I'm on. But here's one thing you can always control. Nobody can come in. Nothing. Even it says not even the devil, no power, no tribulation. Nothing can separate me, Romans 8:39, from the love of God. When you get the revelation that there's no demon in hell, no warfare, no excuse ever. These people said this about me. They split my church. All the reasons and excuses we have why God can't use us or why God can't use our churches it all fails when you realize.
Okay, so we just kind of answered 3 questions.
Yeah, so people must get back to Jesus.
Protecting the presence of God.
Yourself, not the corporate presence.
No, I'm talking about managing yourself to the point that the presence is number 1. It never changes. You never leave it. And that you don't get caught up with all the busyness.
Find ways to stir it and feed it, whether it's John G. Lake or whether it's Brother Lawrence or whatever your favorite man or woman of God or God's general. Find ways to provoke.
But also I'm saying, like,
keep it hungry.
There's stuff that's logistics are going to have to happen.
Yeah.
But you, as the one who's God's using in that moment, you give that
I build the wineskins. For example, when I knew a move of God was breaking out last year, it was 2021, I went to a tiny church in a town that didn't even have 600 people. The place in the natural I would never go and want to stay for 2 months. And I started in this revival hub, small church. And if we had 40, 50 people on some nights, max, we would fill the building with a couple hundred. We went night after night. Sometimes it was 7 days a week for a few weeks. And then we ended up staying, I think, 60 days. And we had this revival called Intimacy. See, a lot of people don't realize you can have intimacy revivals, you can have healing revivals, you can have repentance revivals, you can have joy revivals, you can have harvest. I had to say it because a lot of people are like, revival is people repenting, and they got that old school Pentecostal. It's not revival if they're not repenting.
Here's the thing I tell you. A lot of times, all of those are involved.
Well, Pensacola, Florida was a repentance revival.
But one of them is extreme. So in Pensacola, the height of it was...
And what was Toronto, though? Outpouring Father's love.
Right.
Great. See, and you see Toronto and Pensacola. Lakeland, Florida, if you compare it to Toronto and Pensacola, Lakeland was much more miracles than Toronto and Pensacola. They're very different, but they're all expressions.
Was there repentance? Was there harvest? All those things are true. But we're getting focused on the manifestation, not God, when we do that. We're getting focused on...
And what I realized about Ohio is when it broke out in the meeting, I was up at 10 a.m. praying to 7 p.m. I would go to the meeting, and the meeting was an overflow of me being alone with God, shut up in my hotel room all day long. I would call you, and you were shut up in your room alone with God. I'm soaking all day.
Yeah, we were literally like, what do you do? I'm praying. I'm just in my room.
Not every meeting I go out to preach for a weekend do I want to spend all day just soaking. No. Not that I'm not praying before a meeting, but you know the difference when it's just you're feeling pulled and drawn to the glory without any effort. You can't stop.
I think that it comes down to this, and this is the question you've answered already, and it was this: is it a matter of hunger or faith? And
well, Charles Finney, and you can't talk about the subject of revival without the guy that preached on the lectures. Yeah. Charles Finney was a believer, and there was others with him that believed when the Second Great Awakening they were in revival. They believed you could just promote revival. We're coming 2 weeks. But here's what I would say about that time in the Second Great Awakening in the East Coast, especially in places like New York and New England. There was a fire for 6 months that burned, and they say the epicenter of the Great Awakening was in the city of Rochester. I'm having a school revival. City of Rochester. And this is where the height of the Second Great Awakening, 90% of the city was saved under the ministry of Charles Finney. They talked about the presence of God. This is the most famous stories, like when Charles Finney would go into the factory, and the whole factory came under conviction. They all stopped working. The whole factory got saved. I think that was close to like Utica, New York. I went to these places. I went to the very church where they say this is where Charles Finney preached for 6 months. I used the actual pulpit from the Antiquities Museum that Charles Finney preached it. So, but there was a fire on those meetings that they could go out and say, we're going to promote 2 weeks in this city and bring the fire from here and spread the fire.
But was that a matter? I mean, our personal life, it's that hunger. We have to stoke that hunger in ourselves.
Well, it goes out if we don't give ourselves continually to the Word of God in prayer.
So when it's just faith, sometimes faith is external, like we're trying to do something, but hunger is, I just want you.
God will always meet us, right? Where two or more are gathered. Any meeting, any conference, any seminar, you can plan anything. God will always show up because we live in the kingdom. But revival, every time I've had it, it was totally sovereign. And like Lakeland, Florida, I didn't have any prophetic warning. Nobody told me. Well, actually, that's not true because I was in Australia. I did get one word.
Yeah,
and it was the most major word ever from a prophet in New Zealand.
You told me this,
And here I'm preaching in Australia. I was actually in Brisbane.
They said you're going to go back and
I got 4,000 people in Brisbane, Australia, which is a huge crowd. Pre-Lakeland. This is pre-Lakeland.
Wait, that's a big crowd anywhere.
And so, but I got 4,000 people. This is Brisbane, Australia.
Right.
And this prophet, Rob DeLuca, a lot of knew him out of the Bethel churches. He was a prophet out of New Zealand back then. And he gives me this word. He calls me out and says, Todd, you're going to go to Lakeland, Florida, and a revival, like a boomerang. People are going to talk about the revival that breaks out in Lakeland, and then it's going to boomerang around the world. And South Africa and Australia. And he talked about all these places receiving receiving a revival like Lakeland, Florida, because of the boomerang of revival. He said it would all start in Lakeland. And I laughed.
Right.
And I said, bro, I don't know if I'm going to have 100 people in those meetings. I'm burned out. I'm doing a crusade in Mexico. I don't even want to go to Lakeland, Florida and preach for Stephen Strader. I've never met him.
Right.
And so when
funny.
we showed up, there was nothing about me. I was so burned out. I wasn't extra praying, extra fasting, extra holy. I just showed up and I was like, I can't wait to get through this conference and get back to Canada. I'm so tired. I shouldn't have booked this trip. So the grace of God was so sovereign. And I didn't know Roy Fields. I met him like 2 other times. And Roy told me, Todd, I had ballroom meetings with 30 people before you brought me to Lakeland. People were like, we love Roy Fields. Well, 30 people. When I said, hey, Roy Fields, come do worship for me in Lakeland.
Right.
He's like, Todd, you're one of the first evangelists that promised me and actually came through with things you promised.
Right.
And so when we went for it, you know what Roy said? He goes, you know what's keeping this going, Todd? The fact that you and I have no agenda. Every night we just come together. What do you want to do, Father? What do you want to do, Father? What do you want to do, Father?
The
hunger without the structure.
Sometimes we
just showed up
as ministers. Well, the one thing, and here's one of the other questions, which I know this because, I've had the privilege. We've had these conversations 100 times. I've read the books, by the way. Todd's got some fabulous books.
I tell people all the time, if you don't know Todd Bentley, find all my books and read them.
Because he's pretty raw on them. But sometimes we think we can faith revival. And we're just going to preach revival. We're going to declare revival. And God's going to go, oh, they declared it enough. Boom. But I think it's when we give up and surrender. Now, I don't know.
Most broken places.
I don't know what that looks like. I can't just get there.
Do you remember in Ezra, it says, or not Ezra, God gave them a measure of revival in their bondage.
Yeah.
It is in Ezra, isn't it?
I think
where it talks about how Israel was in bondage and God gave them a spirit of revival. It says a measure called revival. That's the one time in the Bible, in the Old Testament, you see the actual word spirit of revival. It's called measure of revival to save them in their bondage. So I tell people revival happens to get sinners saved, to get a church awakened, to get people out of their sickness. Revival comes when I'm needing to be rescued and I'm burned out and I'm struggling and I need to be free. I'm like, God, every time I've been desperate and want to give up, he's given me revival, right? So what's that verse?
Ezra 9:8.
Ezra 9:8, right here. Now, for a little while, grace has been shown from the Lord our God to leave us a remnant to escape. He's talking about revival in the context of
back in
escaping.
Yeah.
And give us a peg in the holy place that our God may enlighten our eyes. Listen to this. This is revival, right? Spirit of revelation, enlighten our eyes, and give us a measure of revival in our bondage. Ezra 9:8. So there's the word of God for you. Meditate on Ezra 9:8. Measure of revival.
Here's what I want to say to you as a leader. And Todd, when what I've known about him is Todd doesn't hype. Like he doesn't go.
This is my personality all the time. I'm a little dialed up.
No, he's
on Coke Zeros.
It's not the Coke Zero. This is how Todd talks all the time with me. He gets very excited on any kingdom topic, which I love.
That's how he goes. On the mic or off the mic, I'm the same.
But it's not like Todd goes, "Hey Lou, this was the best meetings we ever had." He doesn't do that. So, I think we all want revival. Let's just assume this. We all want revival. How do we get there?
We got to encounter. I don't. You know what's happening to me right now? The love of the Father.
How
do we get the beauty and the holiness and the majesty and the glory?
How do we get to the encounter? Well,
my next revival is going to be based on the revelation. I'm being blown away again. I can't.
No, you can't. I hear
love of the unconditional love of God.
We're going to do a video.
You can't see that and not have revival.
We're gonna do a video on what's happening to Todd, and I'll just start weeping right now if I talk about it, so I'm not going to do it. But the point being this is that you don't know. You can't make yourself hungry.
Sure.
You just got to cry out to God until he moves. You can pray for it. I do all the time.
If you pray for hunger, God will give you hunger.
I sit there and pray, God, make me hungry. Make me hungry. Now, one of the ways that I can stir up hunger is I read, I listen about the revivals of the past and what God's done, without trying to duplicate them or anything. But there was something on the life of Charles Finney. There was something on the life of John G. Lake. It wasn't them. Like, we want to go them, but what we really need to know is, number one, I always look at them and go, if you can use them, you can use me. Why not me?
If God can use Todd Bentley, he can use anybody. I mean, really, if he can use me and all of my broken mess and redemption and recovery, he can use anybody.
And then it's just, for me, my revival began when I needed him. And I was honest.
You're most desperate, needy.
I just got to be honest. This is the best thing you can do. Even in your sin, if you go, God, I need you.
But here's the thing. When you taste the Father's love and the glory, you lose your appetite for sin. We think we got to get rid of all this sinful stuff, and we hide from God in shame.
Right.
But when we come and we experience like the prodigal son.
We're going to get into drinking here in a moment.
When the prodigal son came home, he didn't know if the father was going to receive him or reject him.
I want to give you this.
He didn't know how the father was going to respond. Remember, he took a risk.
I want to tell you this. I'm going to promise you this. God will receive you. That's how good he is.
But the father saw that son,
We're watching prodigals come home right now.
Yeah. Okay? That's the next big revival. People ask me, Todd, what's the next big revival? It's the prodigal sons and daughters.
Now, when the prodigal comes home and you watch that, don't stand idly by.
Yeah.
But don't be like the big brother.
Don't be jealous.
Don't get offended. But enter into it with it. And just enjoy the ride. Okay? Because the family's being restored. And I think that look, I can tell you that there's times in ministry you might get clocked.
Mm-hmm.
You might take a hit. And that's, I wish it wasn't so.
Here's what I got to say. Yeah. And because my life in ministry at different times, the good, the bad, the ugly, I'm not getting into any specific pastor scandals, but I got to say this. I've had the devil, and I've said, I've lost that battle. I've lost rounds. It's okay to say, I took some lickings and lost.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard to go, I've sinned, or I was broken, or I fell, or I made a mistake?
I think
we struggle as people in America with getting honest about the fact that we're not always
I'll
together.
tell you why. Let me tell you why.
I need grace.
Because the church is brutal. And the church needs to realize that, but for grace.
Well, the two greatest enemies of revival, people think it's the religious spirit. It is, but I find the two greatest enemies of revival are the religious spirit and the political spirit. I mean, even more so, the political spirit is what divides us, because now we base what we believe on, well, what's your theology and belief system? God. Are you a Calvinist? Are you Arminian? Are you using the tulip? How do you do your systematic theology?
By the way, I don't know any of that stuff. I'm not.
I love the word of God. Hold on. I love to throw it out there because I can run circles around theologians with terms because I study theology.
We study, but we don't.
People would be amazed that Todd Bentley reads commentaries. Todd Bentley reads. I love ministers that are big theologians. I've read anything and everything Dr. Michael Brown has done. And people are like, really? Dr. Michael Brown, Todd? Yeah. Absolutely. Even though I have many other favorite theologians, most of my theologians are dead guys. But a lot of people, and I throw this out there, go, Todd listens to John Piper? Oh, no. I can hear people in the evangelical camp going, Todd's talking about John Piper, and he believes in the Reformed gospel. I just keep throwing terms out there to flip people over.
I wish I could scan all the books in here because it's the spectrum, right?
People go, "Are you a Calvinist? Are you a Wesleyan?"
I don't know what I am.
But I love at the end of the day,
I don't know what I am.
You don't know if I'm Pentecostal. You don't know if I'm finished works. You don't know if I'm a grace gospel. You don't know if I'm a holiness preacher. And I like the fact that nobody can put that label.
Here's what I want to know. Are you a child of God? That's the big deal.
Yeah.
Because you know what? All those other things are all man-made. Yeah. They're all man-made.
They are.
God didn't sit there and go, Todd, I called you to be a Pentecostal
preacher. Theology is the study of God. That's why I love theology. Right. Holy Ghost, deep, revelatory, because theology is the study of God. And all I want to do is to know Him. And I just love studying God.
I feel it's important to say this on this podcast because some of you are listening, and I want to say this to you. He's the God of second chances. And some of you have struggled, and you have cried out to God and said, God, could you use me again? And I want to tell you, I've watched it. And so I want you to know this right now, because we can't talk about revival if we don't include the prodigal. We
have to ourselves be revived.
Oh my God.
I tell people this in 2019, 2020,
Oh my God.
Todd Bentley died. And 3 years later in 2022, I was resurrected from the dead.
I know.
No, but I'm serious.
I know.
I was resurrected. I died. Religion killed me. Warfare killed me. My past killed me. My sin, whatever you want to call it. I was so done with ministry.
I know.
But you know what the Lord told me in my redemption and recovery? He goes, your story is always going to be about recovery, redemption, and restoration. You know why, Todd? Because if you can be used again and keep going, then other people go, we can overcome our depression, our anxiety, whatever we went through. If Todd and Jessa can go, if after what the church did after Lakeland or after whatever it might have been, I've had some public, I've had some public things, but guess what? Today, and the person that I'm going to be in revival for the next 30 years, I'm thinking long term, not 1 week, not a minute. You set yourself up for disappointment and failure if you don't have a long term goal. You got to think 30 years because you're going to have battles. You're going to have more warfare. People are going to be, we live in cancel culture society. People are going to say things mean on the internet. We have Facebook. People are breaking down with mental health because of comments on Facebook. Children today on Instagram, TikTok, a whole generation of women that hate themselves because they measure themselves by Instagram filters and all the prettier girls than that. You know what's going to be the next move of God? The Ephesians 3. You read it yourself. Paul's last prayer apostolically before you can be filled with all the fullness of God. That's what we want, to be filled with all the fullness of God so he can do exceedingly abundantly above all. But listen to this. He said the only way you'll be filled with all the fullness of God is to experience the love that passes knowledge.
Yes.
Why would Paul pray that your spirit would have the capacity to grasp with all the saints this love that is, God is love in the beginning, but this unconditional love that it's before, while you were yet sinners, you couldn't have messed up. How can you have guilt and condemnation and shame?
I don't.
Why we were yet sinners. No, but I dealt with 22 years of guilt, condemnation, and shame. But nobody knew on the outside because I preached theologically the love and the grace of God. But on the inside, I was lacking experiencing the love of God.
So let's talk.
And this is the key to revival. If you can see the beauty of God, you will be in revival. I got to say that. Just meditate on the beauty of God.
Let's talk about the love of God. And I want to, I'm sorry, we didn't plan this, but we're going to do this for about 4 or 5 minutes. And I want to ask you this question because I know the answer. Okay, I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for you.
Of course. And most people know the answer. Let's talk about the love of God.
Right.
We can give a response. We have an answer.
Talk about how did you do all that you did broken?
Well, I got so caught up in the busyness of the life and the work and the blessing of revival. Listen to this.
Why did you?
I feel like I had wounds. And here's what I realized. I heard Bob Jones tell me one time. He goes, hey, Todd, you'll never be without wounds. But unhealed wounds, we know what they can become.
Right.
But he goes, healed wounds become scars, which you can call them badges of honor. And so I looked at anybody that's had a wound. If you've been to battle, you got shot, right? You got shot. Okay, there's a wound, there's a scar, but the pain is gone.
Yeah.
So I had in my life this idea that I could never be offended. I always was quick to forgive and never carry offense. People would always say, Todd, you're forgiving. You always just kind of let everybody get in. You forgive everyone.
By the way, I've witnessed this.
So my wife would say I'm too forgiving. Yeah. But to me, Jesus said 70 times 7. Do you know why, though? Because I have this overwhelming need of, if you want to, you yourself receive mercy, give mercy. So, but no, listen. I know. It's rooted out of my own condemnation, guilt, and shame.
Okay, that's
so I would overdo the love and mercy because I'm the one day going, God, you know my sin. God, you know my sin. God. Okay. So I would overly love and embrace others because I just believed that I needed mercy.
Okay. Well, we all do. So it's not a wrong belief.
But I was acting out of the root of, I couldn't register the head and the heart in feeling.
Okay, but you were,
because my father never loved me. My mother never hugged me.
So you were working for it.
Without knowing it. I'm 45 years old.
That's what I want to get at.
I'm 45 years old. At 5 years old, until I was 13 years old in my childhood, was this, satanic sexual ritual abuse. I talk about it in my book, my past, my testimony.
Right.
So a lot of how I learned love was through, at 5, 6 years old, a perverted version of love through sexual abuse, which involved satanic stuff and the occult. I ended up, and I talk about this in my story, it's in my book already, 20 years of preaching and telling my story. This isn't new stuff, but I went to prison at a young age at 13 years old. So, and then when I got saved after years of addiction to drugs, 3 drug overdoses, came out of prison as a drug addict, all of those things were to cope with pain. Like there's addicts that are addicts, but most addicts have a root, and their root is pain. So the Lord showed me the other day, he goes, you know what you did, Todd? Because you love me so much, you would never be mad at me. So if there was anything that ever happened in my life in ministry that hurt me, I would never blame God, because I had this absolutely belief that God could never fail. God is perfect. God. So, but I would internalize, because I would punish myself, because I learned when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old that I didn't deserve the love of God. So I learned ways to get it through perversion, through sex, through drugs, through rock and roll.
Then through
but when I got saved, ministry, performance, the busyness of ministry, I made it now, and I'm going to show these people that I made it, because I've got 2,000. I got, and my idea of my acceptance of people accepting Todd Bentley was based on my external success, based on dollars, cents, numbers, and miracles. And the root of it all was because I had never experienced that the Father loves me before I was born. This is what people don't get.
He loves you because of the cross.
Well, here's what I believe now, and I'm going to really throw it out there theological as we end this podcast. I have now come to believe in Romans 9:11 that because I was pre-elected, see, I'm a pre-elected. I believe that because the Father had it in his mind before the foundation of the world. So I'm a predestination, Ephesians 1 guy. So I'm now more of a Calvinistic in my belief than a Wesley. Wesley and Armenians split the Pentecostal movement from the two beliefs, the second grace, sanctification versus sanctification, and you work it out. So I realized it doesn't matter whether I'm an Arminianist or a Calvinist. You don't have to choose. These are belief systems in the theological world. But here's for me, and a lot of people that don't understand and know, bearded tattoo guys have no idea what we're talking about. They would relate to my part of the story in that for 46 years, because I was a cast out demons, heal the sick, instantaneous results, I didn't have a big value for inner healing. So because I was good with this person hurt me, or this man, or this woman, or that, I never had bitterness. I was always quick to forgive, but I internally would punish myself with pain, tattoos, because I'm a Christian now, so I can't use drugs, so I got tattoos. Or different things, I would distract myself. It could be Netflix. It could be food. It could be relationship, whatever to avoid pain, because all of my life I learned to be an addict and run from pain. I just had different ways
to deal with it.
To deal with pain.
And you just did it.
The Father showed me my root was pain. I went, well, where's my pain coming from? And this is where I got blown away. The Father said, you know where the pain's coming from? This memory of when you were 5. And then I got mad. Oh, God, I've been to counseling. Here we go again with childhood life. Now, watch this. And I'm in like I've got a counselor in the room with me. He's going to do some theophostic, and I'm not open to it. I said, he's like, well, you know how to wait on the Lord. Close your eyes and just invite the Lord to come. And I went, well, Jesus, if you have anything you want to do in me, deliver me of demons, get me free and healed, I'm open to it. Here I am in the room with a safe guy. And all of a sudden, I'm at this door. I'm going to end it with this, and I'm going to talk about this more later, but I'm at this door, and this door is this memory when I was like between 5 and 7 that's so traumatic, I blacked it out. The psychologists have been working with me since I was 13 to get a repressed memory, they call it. A repressed memory. I said, well, I know what happened to me because I was sat down as a child and told how I was abused, and the guy went to prison. And my best friend at that time blew his head off with a shotgun, and I went into drugs, and I ended up in prison. So I had this whole childhood mess, and I knew what happened to me because I was told. But I don't remember the abuse. Well, all of a sudden, in 2005, I'm on a world tour preaching with Heidi Baker in Europe, and I have this dark night of the soul, my first Todd Bentley public burnout and collapse before Lakeland. People that knew my ministry back then was like, Todd's in a dark night of the soul. He burned out in Europe. Something happened. He can't preach. He cried for 21 days, and apparently he's having memories of childhood abuse. And so I went through a measure in 2005 of healing. I had to take 18 months out of the ministry.
Right.
That's when I came back with all the tattoos. I didn't have any tattoos, and I came back. Todd's like, Todd Bentley's back. And so, but I was in so much pain. I took 18 months, and I was not even 28 years old. I didn't think I was ever going to come back.
Right.
So I've had like 3 major burnouts in my life.
Right.
But the root of all my burnouts isn't any one particular event. It was this thing where the Father finally, this year, April 2022, I'm praying, and I see this door, and I went, why am I at this door? And I felt like the Father inside of me said, open the door. And I went, no, I can't open that door. There's a black monster. I don't want to remember what happened to me, that abuse and that time in my life. The Father said, but this is the last thing. We need to open this door. I said, I'm scared to open the door. I'm going to have a panic attack, anxiety, depression, everything. But why do you want to open this door? Every time counselors would work with me, they go, why do we come to this one point and you don't want to talk about this one event? And I said, I don't remember it and I don't want to. I'm 45 years old. I don't need to remember those things. All of a sudden, the door opens. And I think it's going to be some black demon, some bad memory. All of a sudden, it's the Father.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Father says to me, all your life you believed you were a predator, but you've been a victim.
Yeah.
It's all you ever learned.
Yeah.
You need to know how to let me love you because it was never your fault when you were 5, when you were 6, when you were 7.
Right.
But all of a sudden, when the Lord said that to me, he rewired 45 years.
Yeah.
Listen, you ask my wife and anybody that's knowing me.
I know.
God rewired me April 2022. This is 2022.
Yeah.
God rewired me in a 15-hour encounter where my personality and everything about me changed. And I was healed of all the anxiety, the depression, the suicide, everything that was ever wrong was gone. And in one day, and I don't know why God chose that day, I could have used that healing 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But God chose, and it wasn't because I had ministry to go into.
No.
I thought maybe in 2019, 2020, I would just retire and disappear, COVID, and just not come back.
I laugh.
But the Father's love touched me, the unconditional, the Father's, and I've spent now, what is this, September, I'm recording this podcast now, 6 months.
Yeah.
And I can't get off of Ephesians 3 where Paul prayed for the height, the width, the length, the depth, the love that he said it has to be experienced.
I know.
So what would happen if everybody experienced and felt the unconditional love of God, which God, in his great plan, predestined that I would be saved and sanctified? How can I blow this?
Well, here's the other thing.
I can't.
That's the essence of revival.
Eternal salvation and security. I'm a pre-election. I believe in the election of God, and that's going to mess you up because you're going to have all kinds of. He's God electing some people to hell. Don't worry about that. The fact that you were in the mind of God while you were yet sinners, Jesus finished everything.
This is what Paul's speaking about in Romans.
The grace
of God, that him who gave us his son.
Jesus finished it all.
Yeah.
All my sin, past, present, and future, has been dealt with. I still believe in repentance. I still repent. But
here's what I try to tell people: like, you can't come to Jesus.
So you can't tell me I'm disqualified. No. You can't tell me. You can't tell anybody they're done.
Well, you know how I feel about that one. Because that was where I was getting attacked.
When God planned the whole thing before humanity began, he already began who was going to be saved, holy, sanctified. And then he knew we were going to mess it up, so he took care of it at the cross.
Here's the thing I don't know.
It's great.
I don't know who's going to get saved. He does.
We just preach the truth.
We preach. And then he's the one who draws them.
What do we preach, though? Good news.
Yes.
We got to get back to preaching good news. People got to hear, because how good is the cross? How good is the message of Jesus coming to save us? And while we were sick, he comes to give us our healing and takes it upon his own self so that we couldn't mess it up. He wants us redeemed. He wants us rest. And so that revelation to me set me free from any idea that I have to muster up or perform or be anything other than what I already am. Now, other people have gotten that revelation before me, but I'm just getting it now.
He's just getting it. And you know what? You have to get it too. And look, it's
God's
not
healing people their pains.
It's not here. This is not what we're talking about. Don't learn this just theologically. Pray and say, God, I need to experience your love for myself.
You know what I do practically now? Every day I just lay on the floor and I go, Father, I receive your unconditional love.
That's right. People ask me all the time, how do you seek God's face? Well, number one,
Thank you for your
He's
unconditional
not
love.
away from me. God is right here. So it's not like I have to draw him.
Yeah, remember that revelation, to go inside. Drop down into your spirit, you'll find the throne room.
It says this: when you go to pray, go into the closet, close the door, and your Father who is in secret, he's already there waiting for you. He's like, I have 3 kids. My kids don't have to beg for my affection. Matter of fact,
They can have it. If they come to the door right now, I need you, Dad.
they get it all the
Instant
time.
access.
Instant access. It's just
And you don't go, where have you been all week? You
I
didn't
don't
read the
go,
Bible all week. You
I'm
didn't
sorry.
do all these holy, you
Right.
didn't attend these church
I don't
meetings
know.
this
You
week.
didn't tithe, so I'm not sure I love you.
How much sin have you been involved in?
Right.
How about your thought life?
That's-
And we start measuring our, and
That's
listen,
a bad place. It's a
there
bad
is
gospel.
a holiness that works itself out
Yes.
of experiencing the beauty and the glory of God for your own self.
Holiness is not something you work out through rules. It's you work out through intimacy.
And so I'm in the holiness right now because I just keep beholding the glory.
All right.
And so
I know we went longer. than
Part
one
2,
Christmas.
Supernatural Living Messages. Find me, Todd Bentley. Put it on iTunes. Sign up.
Let's pray.
You'll find the podcast, and you want to get part 1, part 2, and follow every week. But we're going to pray for you. You're hungry. You're stirred. Lord, I thank you right now for the fresh fire in our hearts today. But I pray we keep talking and coming back to the need to be hungry and desperate, and when nobody's looking, it's just you and me, and we want to be that David. When the crowds aren't there, we're going to kill the lion and the bear, and we're on the harp, and we want to be the David alone with you. Help us get back to that place. If we're called to carry and be a part of the revival that's about to take place in the world, in America, may we do it from a place of knowing the unconditional love and grace of God, experiencing that in such a way that all of our religious theology just comes crashing down, and we empower people to be free. And so, Lord, I thank you that you're releasing a measure of revival, just like it says in Ezra 9, verse 8, in the Old Covenant, that the purpose of the measure of revival is to save us in our bondage. God will send revival to save you because you are prayerless. Revival is what you need to get back to prayer.
That's right.
And so, God, we need revival. How many revivals do we need? Well, we need to keep getting hungry. We need to wake up and wake up. You know,
I just need more.
And again, awakening, reformation, these are different terms. We're talking today about the Holy Spirit reviving, which is to live again. So, we want to live again, and I have found a fire this year.
Yeah.
I have found a fire that I haven't had on my life since I remember when I was preaching at 22, 23, 20. I was in Abbotsford, BC, Canada. I have a purity, and to me it goes back before Lakeland even, before being with Rick Joyner and Morningstar and Charlotte. I haven't had this passion where I feel whole. I'm whole, not just 5 years ago. I'm whole all the way back.
I mean, have you ever been this whole before?
I don't know that I've ever been.
Right, that's my point. All right, so I want to pray for 3 things. Number 1, I want to pray for the prodigal who just might come across this. And I want to say, look,
come home.
Yeah, just look, that doesn't mean you have to go to a church to come home. Just sit down where you're at and just say, I am God. Father, I miss you. I just want you to pour your love out on me. And
feel it
the
again.
moment, by the way, before you even turned, he was already there. I want you to know he has never left you nor forsaken you.
Again.
He's just waiting for you.
Feel his love again.
Just when you turn your affections, the moment you do, the experience of that love is going to come upon you. I want to pray for the minister who just wants to serve God so well and wants to see his city touched. And Lord, don't send revival in their city, send revival in them. Let them experience that love, that revival, and then as a fire with everyone that they touch, everyone they come with, they are just lighting other people's torches, and they're just continuing to burn and set others on fire.
That's right.
And I thank you for that, Father. And I want to talk to that person who is that minister who thinks you can't be used anymore.
Come on.
I want to tell you something. The God who called you has never stopped calling you. He's never once said, you know what, I'm done with you. He's not done with you.
He can find new ways.
I know, he'll just, look, we need you. You're part of the puzzle. You're part of the piece. And it's time for you to come and take your place. Without shame, okay? Because shame is a identity killer.
That's it.
Okay? But you don't, look, just call out to him and say, God, can you use me one more time? Lord, I'll give you everything. If you could just, can you just use me one more time?
Shame.
I failed. Okay, we all have. In one way or another, we failed. It's okay. It's not about us. It's really about him. So just come on back. Come back into it. Let that fire reburn. I pray for your marriages. I pray for your ministries. I pray for your children. Lord, send revival upon the priest, upon your ministers, those who you have called to send out there. They're standing in the gap. Revive them, give them strength. Let the angels come, Father, and let them minister to them and help them to bring what you have called them to bring. And I thank you for that, Father, because you are so good. Jesus said don't you know I could just ask the Father and he'll send 12 legions of angels?
Come on.
Don't you know you can just ask the Father and he'll send you help like that? Don't you know you could just call him? He's not a no God. He's a God who gave you his son, and with his son, he freely gives you all things you need. He will flood your life, and I thank you for it, Father, because you are always good. Get the podcast.
Share it. Find a way to share it on all platforms, on whatever way you follow on YouTube or our website or app. But, iTunes, Supernatural Living Messages.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me and Apostle Lewis here at the Gate Church. We're recording down here in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida. And I'm sure you'll hear in the days to come a lot more of what God's doing in this great city, in this beautiful city of Jacksonville. We're excited about what God's building right now. So God bless you guys. Be filled with fresh fire. Thanks for joining us. And I'm sure you have more questions, but press into him, and he is the answer.
Amen.
Amen.